These are RPGs that most people who love RPGs haven't played. Some of them reviewed well and sold poorly. Some reviewed poorly but deserve better. Some were Japan exclusive for years before fan translations surfaced. Some got buried by bigger releases in the same window. Each one is doing something the rest of the genre wasn't attempting at the time, or doing something familiar so well that the lack of attention is genuinely strange. Skies of Arcadia is a Dreamcast RPG, ported to GameCube as Legends in 2003 with additional content, and the most earnest implementation of the adventure RPG spirit in the 3D era. You play air pirates on a world of floating islands where the oceans are made of clouds. The tone is adventure story optimism, no grimdark underpinning, no late-game revelation that makes heroes question their purpose, no mandatory tragedy. It's about discovery and the joy of exploring unknown territory, and it sustains that register for 50 hours without becoming cloying. The ship-to-ship naval battle system sits alongside standard turn-based party combat. Two ships fire cannons and special weapons at each other, while crews shout encouragement from the bridge, and winning ship battles unlocks new areas and story content. Collecting discovery points by finding unique world locations adds an exploration reward separate from the main quest. The random encounter rate is the most consistent criticism, and it's accurate. The Legends version reduced it slightly. The optimism isn't naive. It's a deliberate choice, and it makes the game feel different from nearly everything the JRPG genre produced in the following decade. For a certain kind of player who finds the genre's drift toward darkness and irony exhausting, that register is exactly what's been missing, and this is where to find it. The game never received a re-release beyond that GameCube port. Disc prices are climbing, and Sega has shown no interest in revisiting it despite the brand having obvious current value. Summoner 2 is the PS2 sequel to a game nobody played, and it's substantially better than its predecessor in every dimension. Better combat, better writing, better protagonist, better world design. You play as a queen who can summon ancient creatures and transform into an avatar of a goddess, navigating a political conflict across a world where three civilizations and a divine hierarchy are converging toward catastrophe. The matriarchal fantasy setting with a competent adult female protagonist was rare in 2002 and remains underrepresented now. The main character is written with wit and genuine personality. The supporting cast has chemistry that the first Summoner's generic heroes never achieved. The summoning system is the design argument. 3 companions join your party, but you can also call powerful temporary creatures for specific encounters. Summoning has tactical purpose beyond raw power. Certain creatures affect enemy formations. Others provide environmental advantages specific to dungeon layouts. The combat is real-time, with a chain system rewarding consecutive hits across multiple enemies. The game is visually unremarkable even by early 2000s PS2 standards, and the dungeon design becomes repetitive in the second act. Volition shut down in 2023 after the company was acquired following Saints Row's commercial disappointment, making a re-release of a PS2-only title unlikely without a rights transfer. Physical copies are accessible at reasonable prices. It received solid reviews at launch and immediately fell out of any ongoing conversation, which is precisely why it's on this list.
Under the impression that gods received a proper way.
The Last Story is a Mistwalker RPG designed by Hironobu Sakaguchi for a Wii audience that had mostly stopped buying JRPGs. Operation Rainfall, the fan campaign that pressured Nintendo of America into localizing it alongside Xenoblade Chronicles and Pandora's Tower, gave it a brief spotlight before the Wii died and took the catalog with it. The combat system earned that attention. Fights are real-time on a battlefield with full party command available, a gathering mechanic that pulls enemy aggro to protect allies, environmental interaction through explosive barrels and destructible cover, and magic circles that persist in the terrain and change the tactical math of every engagement. The system rewards experimentation and performs differently on each replay. The story follows a mercenary company navigating a class-divided city where they've become entangled in political conflict. The ensemble cast of 7 mercenaries with distinct personalities, histories, and recurring banter is the best ensemble he produced since Final Fantasy VI. The main love story is one of the better-written romances in the JRPG genre. The game is short by JRPG standards at around 25 hours, which works in its favor. Exclusivity and physical-only distribution have made it increasingly difficult to access legally. No re-release has happened despite his subsequent work on Fantasian gaining renewed attention. It remains the most overlooked major RPG from Sakaguchi's independent period and one of the most underserved games on a console that deserved a better legacy. Tales of Eternia, released as Tales of Destiny 2 in North America due to trademark issues, is the 2000 Namco Tales entry that established several structural standards before Tales of Symphonia made the series mainstream. The lens system, food crafting, skit conversations between party members, and linear motion battle system refinements all appear here in mature form. You travel between 2 worlds, Inferia and Celestia, and the dual-world structure gives the game visual and tonal variety single-world entries lack. Mirti is the mechanical highlight. She arrives not speaking the player's language, and communication develops through gameplay rather than a cutscene. She learns words gradually across the runtime. The Kramels, elemental spirits bound to each world, function as summons and as the magic resource system. The battle system is the Tales template at its most arcade-like, rewarding aggressive play. The North American name change caused it to be dismissed by players expecting a sequel to Tales of Destiny. A PSP version with additional content released in Japan and Europe, but not North America. The PS1 original disc is the primary path for most players. The game represents Tales at the moment before the series found its mainstream formula. Looser, stranger, more experimental in its dual-world structure and its approach to language and communication as gameplay elements. As the foundation the later entries stand on, it has received less credit than it deserves from a fan base that mostly entered through Symphonia and rarely looks back at what preceded it. Baten Kaido's Eternal Wings and the Lost Ocean is a GameCube RPG from 2003 with a card-based battle system and a premise that uses the second person. You are a guardian spirit contracted to the protagonist Kalas, and the game addresses you directly throughout. Kalas asks you what you want to do. Other characters question whether you're still paying attention. The relationship between player and protagonist develops across the story in ways that the true ending makes explicit and devastating. The structural commitment to the second-person framing separates this from every other card RPG. The Magnus card system manages every action. Attack cards cycle through your deck, and numbers combine into sequences for more powerful strikes. Elemental Magnus change properties over time. Fire cards left in your deck cool down. Water cards freeze into ice. Plants wilt. Quest Magnus carry items collected from the environment and are required for field puzzles. The visual design uses a hand-painted aesthetic that remains striking. Flying continents with specific cultural identities, enormous boss designs, environments that look like concept art brought to function. The English voice acting in the localization is notoriously poor, widely cited as a barrier that drove players away early. The sequel has a better story and better localization. A Nintendo Switch remaster released in 2023 collects both games and resolves the voice acting problem with a new recording. The original's narrative, once you reach the true ending, justifies the full investment. Trails of Cold Steel is from the Falcom RPG series most Western JRPG fans discovered through later entries and found themselves needing to start from the beginning to understand. Cold Steel 1 and 2 both follow Reen Swartzer at a military academy in the Erebonian Empire, and a class of 9 who train together as field study commissions take them across the country. The narrative is dense with political world-building. The Erebonian aristocracy, the reformist faction, the army, the church, paced slowly enough that players who needed immediate payoff lost patience before it arrived. What Cold Steel does better than most JRPGs is NPC depth. returning to towns after major story events updates every NPC's dialogue to reflect what happened and how they personally feel about it. The bonding system develops relationships with each classmate through optional events that accumulate across multiple entries and carry forward. The orbment system, each character's customizable magic grid, is one of the most elaborate tactical skill customization systems in any JRPG. Combat is turn-based with visible turn order, terrain positioning, and break/brave mechanics. Cold Steel 1 and 2 are the foundation. Cold Steel 3 and 4 deliver on the political world building the first two built. The complete arc runs over 200 hours. For players who commit, it's among the most carefully constructed JRPG universes in the modern era. The early entries being overlooked means most players miss the foundations being laid, and those foundations are what makes the later payoffs land as hard as they do. Wild Arms 3 is the PS2 RPG that traded the series' anime aesthetic for something deliberately referencing American westerns. Watercolor deserts, sparse orchestral score, guns as primary tools, a dystopian frontier where the world is actively drying out and collapsing. The four protagonists are introduced in separate chapters that each play differently before converging, an unusual structural choice for a 2002 JRPG that works well. The tone sustains the desolation of a dying world without becoming oppressive across the full runtime. The hex battle system places characters and enemies on interconnected hexagonal tiles with free movement between them each turn, abilities affecting specific hex shapes rather than fixed rows or columns. The force gauge builds through combat and grants unique abilities when full, distinct for each character. The arm customization system, guns with modular attachments and elemental bullets modified throughout, is the series' signature contribution to JRPG design. This had the weakest mainline sales partly because the aesthetic shift alienated fans of earlier entries, and weak marketing made it invisible in Western markets. The dungeon design and the hex system make it mechanically the strongest game in the series. No modern re-release exists. The original PS2 disc is the only path. Prices are still reasonable, and the game rewards players willing to find it with a JRPG that uses its setting more purposefully than most. The world visibly dying in real time, rendered in deliberate watercolor deserts, gives the series a melancholy identity that nothing in the franchise has since replicated.
Here goes!
Radiant Historia is an Atlas RPG for the DS with 2 parallel timelines and a white chronicle that lets you move between them freely, returning to past decision points to change outcomes that have locked one timeline into a dead end. The mechanic runs deeper than most time manipulation RPGs attempt. The game tracks nodes on each timeline, requires visiting every branch point to unlock the true ending, and builds its story around the idea that correct history requires assembling both timelines rather than choosing one. Choices in the alternate timeline unlock paths in the primary one. The narrative and mechanical systems are genuinely integrated rather than existing in parallel. The position-based combat is the mechanical contribution. A 3x3 grid holds enemies, and attacks can push or pull them into formations for area hits, chain combos, and vulnerability stacking. Setting up a group of enemies in a corner and hitting them simultaneously rewards tactical thinking without the overhead of a full SRPG. Yoko Shimomura composed the soundtrack, which is among her finest work and frequently cited as the reason players return to the game years later. The writing is more politically engaged than most JRPGs of the era. Stock is a competent adult rather than a plucky teenager, and the war's causes and consequences are examined with genuine care across both timelines. The 3DS remaster added a third timeline and voice acting. The original DS version is considered by many to be the tighter experience. Grim Dawn is the action RPG built by former Iron Lore developers, the studio behind Titan Quest, using the Titan Quest engine under license. It's the best action RPG in the Diablo lineage since Diablo 2 itself. The dual-class system lets you combine any 2 of 6 mastery trees. producing combinations that no one at Crate fully tested. An occultist soldier plays differently than a soldier occultist depending on which masteries were taken first, and the total combination space produces dozens of viable archetypes. The devotion system provides celestial constellation bonuses unlocked by completing specific kill conditions during a run. The world is a dark fantasy setting where demonic possession and a rival faction called the Ethereals have competed to consume humanity, leaving survivors in a civilization that has nearly ended. The faction system tracks your standing with several groups and determines which vendors, quests, and items you can access. Choosing which factions to antagonize is a meaningful structural decision with downstream consequences. Ashes of Malmouth and Forgotten Gods added new masteries and campaign content roughly equivalent to the base game in scope. 4 years of continuous post-launch development through 2020 refined balance throughout. The Diablo IV era renewed interest in what the previous generation of the genre, and Grim Dawn holds up comfortably against everything that came after. The dual-class combination space alone justifies multiple separate play-throughs with completely different builds and playstyles.
They turn them into engines and systems for their ships.
Are the people from Shell 5?
Septerra Core Legacy of the Creator is a PC RPG that did something almost no Western developer had tried. Build a JRPG for the PC audience as an original game using the console RPG template rather than porting a console title. The world is Septerra, 7 continental shells orbiting a biocomputer core, each home to a distinct culture ranging from the technologically advanced chosen on the top shell through desert scavengers, holy knights, and bioluminescent mutants at the bottom. A junk scavenger on Shell 2 gets pulled into a planetary crisis when the chosen try to force open the core before the prophesied natural conjunction. The fate card magic system is mechanically noteworthy. You collect cards over the course of the game, and casting spells involves combining 2 or 3 cards, with the combination determining the effect. The same card used alone produces different results than when paired. The combination space rewards experimentation in ways that standard MP systems don't. The combat is ATB style and follows the JRPG template. The pre-rendered backgrounds have an anime-influenced art direction foreign to the PC RPG aesthetic of 1999. The dungeon designs in the middle and late game are repetitive, and the encounter rate is high throughout. But 7 entirely distinct civilizations orbiting a living computer is one of the most original settings in any RPG of the era, and the score by Martin O'Donnell and Michael Salvatori preceded their Halo work by 2 years. The combination is unlike anything else on PC at the time. Blue Dragon is an Xbox 360 RPG with character designs by Akira Toriyama and a classic JRPG structure that was unfashionable in 2007 and becomes retroactively interesting as the genre moves further from it. 3 characters, each have a shadow creature leveling independently through a class system similar to Final Fantasy V's job system. Shadows have separate XP tracks. Abilities carry over between classes once mastered, and the combination space across 3 Shadows class grids supports significantly different playthroughs. Each Shadow grows into a meaningfully different tactical tool, depending on which classes you developed and in which order you pursued them. The Toriyama visual style is the hook. The class system is the mechanical depth. Blue Dragon is aimed at a JRPG audience that loves SNES-era Square games and wanted something new that felt like those games without being ironic about it. It achieves this cleanly and without apology. The story leans on the child hero template without subverting it. That's the main weakness. The game is accessible, well-paced, and short enough to complete without the grind that longer JRPGs require. 360 exclusivity and Microsoft's subsequent retreat from the Japanese market limited its audience significantly. The game sold 160,000 copies in Japan in its first week, which was Mist Walker's best performance, and still faded from conversation almost immediately. Romancing Saga 2 is a Super Famicom game that took 23 years to receive an official English release. a mobile and Steam port in 2017, followed by a full 3D remake in 2024. The most structurally radical entry in the Saga series. There is no single protagonist. You play as the Emperor of Avalon, a dynasty whose history you write across multiple generations. When your current emperor dies or retires, you choose an heir from the nation's character classes, who begins with abilities and techniques inherited from the previous generation. Events you triggered decades ago have changed the world. Heroes who seemed significant in earlier reigns died off-screen. The tone is dynastic historical epic rather than hero's journey. The free scenario structure has no main quest in the traditional sense. Enemies are factions you can address in any order, and ignoring some too long causes them to strengthen and claim territories permanently. The LP system replaces traditional HP with a permanent stat. Characters who run out of LP are removed forever, and full party wipes in the current Emperor's reign, but continue the dynasty. Formation research produces new tactical approaches you pass down to successors. The recent remake expanded the content significantly and added the full English localization the game always deserved. For players who want a JRPG that operates like a dynastic simulation rather than a hero's journey, nothing else in the genre does this with this degree of structural commitment. The series' reputation for being inaccessible has kept it niche. The remake removes most of that barrier. Resonance of Fate is a tri-ace RPG that shipped within the same week as FF13 and God of War 3 and was immediately buried by both. The combat system it contained has no equivalent in the genre before or since. 3 characters run choreographed paths you define with anchor points, crossing each other's trajectories mid-battle to generate resonance points. And those points power tri-attacks. They're the only way to kill tougher enemies. Watching a properly executed combo where characters vaulting off each other in slow motion, firing mid-air, landing, and firing again. The system takes hours to understand and longer to master, and the in-game tutorials are delivered as screen text so small on standard TVs that many players missed critical rules. The world is built inside Basel, a massive environmental purifier tower that humanity moved into after poisonous gas covered the surface. The hex-based world map requires spending in-game currency to unlock adjacent hexes, which created friction for players who prefer direct exploration. The story delivers itself in a roundabout way. The prologue context video plays on the main menu demo loop rather than in the game itself, meaning players who started without watching it missed significant setup. The gun customization system is also pretty deep. Wildermyth is a tactical RPG that procedurally generates stories using a card-driven narrative engine, and the result is the best implementation of choices matching in any tactical RPG of the decade. Your party of heroes isn't a fixed cast. You create them, they age, they retire or die in battle, and the stories that happen to them are drawn from a library of hundreds of events with branching outcomes. A hero who encounters a mystical pool might absorb it into their body and gain water-based powers. The next time you play, that encounter might resolve differently. Relationships form organically. Heroes pass legacies to younger adventurers, and by the end of a campaign, you've generated a party history that genuinely couldn't have happened in anyone else's run. The tactical combat is grid-based and straightforward, with positioning and the unique transformation abilities that heroes gain through narrative events providing the tactical variety. The 2D paper-cut art style is immediately distinctive and internally consistent. 5 campaigns provide different story frameworks and enemy factions. The game has full mod support and an active community extending the event library beyond what they shipped. The weakness is that the generated narrative events vary in quality. Some are genuinely impactful, others are forgettable, and players who want a fixed authored story will find the procedural structure less satisfying than one designed by hand. For players who love building party histories, Wildermyth is currently the best place to do that. Albert Odyssey Legend of Eldian is the Sega Saturn's best traditional RPG in the Western catalog. The silent protagonist Pike, helps a fairy navigate a world where two warring kingdoms and an ancient evil are converging. The presentation makes immediate impression. Character sprites are larger and more expressively animated than most 16-bit RPGs. Environments are painted with a detail the Saturn's 2D hardware could sustain where others couldn't, and the town and dungeon designs have warmth that the palette and animation quality communicate directly to anyone who grew up with SNES-era JRPGs. The battle system is turn-based and approachable rather than demanding, building on JRPG conventions without subverting them. The character dynamics carry the story through conventional beats more effectively than the plot mechanics alone would. The writing is warm and frequently funny, easy to dismiss and harder to replicate. Working Design's localization is characteristically punched up, jokes and references inserted into a script that didn't contain them, which divided players who wanted a direct translation and those who found the result charming. The game runs around 20 hours, and the late-game difficulty ramps more abruptly than the early sections suggest. It was one of the few JRPGs designed specifically for the Saturn's 2D strengths rather than fighting against the hardware's 3D limitations, and the visual quality gap between it and PS1 JRPGs is immediately visible. As a game that hasn't been in anyone's active conversation for over a decade, it deserves rediscovery. Shadow Hearts Covenant is the PS2 RPG that most JRPG fans who discovered it call the best entry in the series, and then discover almost none of their friends have heard of it. Set in a supernatural alternate history of World War I Europe, Yuri returns from the first game, accompanied by a vampire countess, a failed Catholic priest, a wolf man, a French girl, and a strong man who combines professional wrestling with magic. The setting and cast are the first reason to play it. The writing is darker and stranger than most JRPGs and maintains its sense of humor consistently. The lottery member side quests constitute their own comedy subgame, and the game's willingness to be absurd while maintaining genuine emotional stakes is unusual. The Judgment Ring is the battle mechanic, a spinning wheel with colored segments you stop with a button press. Standard hits become critical hits if you land the narrow inner segment. Spells hit harder based on execution quality. It creates real-time pressure within a turn-based structure without the overhead of a full action system. Covenant is the second game in the trilogy. Playing the first Shadow Hearts adds context, though it isn't required. The third game, From the New World, moves to an American road trip setting that divided the fan base significantly. The publisher's bankruptcy ended any continuation. As a PS2 JRPG with a genuinely distinctive setting and a combat system that rewards engagement, it represents one of the era's most underappreciated works. Nox is an action RPG from Westwood Studios, the Command & Conquer studio, that released in the same window as Diablo 2 and was immediately buried by it. You get sucked into a fantasy world through his television during a cable outage. The game maintains a consistent sense of humor about this throughout its runtime. The three-class structure have substantially different campaigns running through the same world. Warriors are locked out of the Wizard City. Wizards entering the warrior's stronghold face immediate hostility. Conjurers are neutral and move freely through both areas without restriction. The same locations have different occupants, available quests, and attitudes toward Jack, the protagonist, depending on class choice. Each campaign ends differently, with outcomes determined by who you were rather than choices made along the way. The Wizard campaign's magic system, where setting stacked spell traps on the ground for enemies to trigger, is original and specific to this game. The Conjurer campaign involves building an army of charmed animals and captured monsters that fight beside you through the entire game. The Warrior campaign is the most straightforward but benefits from fast, satisfying melee throughout. Nox is short, linear, and mechanically tight, with 3 complete play-throughs building a full picture of the world and its factions. The Open Nox Community Port project keeps it running on modern systems.
Travelers, that's what we are. Yeah, I'm the husband.
Lost Odyssey is an RPG written by Kiyoshi Shigematsu, with story concept by Hironobu Sakaguchi, and it's the last great traditional turn-based JRPG from a major studio before the genre systematically moved away from turn-based combat. You follow an immortal soldier who has lived 1,000 years and lost his memories. The game assembles his past through the 1,000 years of dreams. Short literary prose pieces describing specific episodes from the protagonist's history, presented as scrolling text with ambient music. These sections are not cutscenes, they are literature. Several have made players cry who hadn't cried at a game since Final Fantasy VII. And that comparison isn't hyperbole. The battle system is classic ATB with a skill link system where mortal party members teach immortal ones skills they'd otherwise never learn, creating investment in both the immortal protagonists and immortal characters who travel with them. The ring system adds timing-based inputs to physical attacks for critical hits. The game runs 40 hours, and the Xbox 360 exclusivity limited its audience. A Japanese re-release arrived on Xbox One. The Western version never came. The 1,000 Years of Dream sections represent some of the best writing ever produced specifically for a video game. They're the primary reason this game belongs in any serious conversation about RPG craft, and they're the reason players who find the game 20 years after release report the same reaction as those who played at launch.
What?
Imperial capital or away, I'll always glad.
Suikoden 5 is the PS2 RPG that recovered from 4's disappointment to produce the best entry in the series since Suikoden 2. You play as the Prince of Falena, a matriarchal nation where political succession runs through the queen and the prince's role is ceremonial, which becomes a structural problem when a coup happens. 108 stars of destiny to recruit across a 50 to 60 hour runtime, each with their own reason for joining and a unique skill or story contribution to the party and the headquarters you rebuild. Tracking down every last recruitment condition is a rewarding secondary project that runs the full length of the game. The 6-character battle party, the largest in the series, enables complex formation strategies. War battle sequences return from earlier games with improved tactical options. The writing is the strongest the series produced in the 3D era. The political intrigue of Falena's court, the prince's relationships with his bodyguards and family, and the personal stories of individual recruits are all written with genuine care throughout the runtime. The first 8 hours are notoriously slow. Palace intrigue with minimal player agency, and players who bounced off the opening missed a game that becomes excellent once the protagonist is free of the starting location. The series ended and has had no modern mainline continuation beyond Eiyuden Chronicle, kickstarted by original creator Yoshitaka Murayama before his death in 2024. Given that, Suikoden 5 represents the final complete form of what he built over 3 decades, and it deserved better than the commercial reception it received. Grandia 2 is the sequel that took the original's IP gauge battle system and refined it into one of the most satisfying turn-based combat experiences the PS2 era produced. The cancel mechanic of interrupting an enemy's action by depleting their IP before they execute is sharper and more clearly telegraphed than in the original. The spell system is more flexible. Party balance across the 4-character roster is better calibrated. Everything the first Grandia did is cleaner here. The story is darker and more directly engaged with religious critique. Ryudo is a cynical mercenary hired to escort a church songstress who carries a sealed evil, and the story unpacks what that church has been doing to maintain its power across the world. The game released simultaneously on Dreamcast and PS2 and was ported to PC, reaching multiple audiences before being forgotten by most. The PC port has compatibility issues on modern systems. The Dreamcast version is considered the cleanest. No HD remaster or re-release has arrived despite the original Grandia receiving the HD collection treatment on Switch and PC. The reason isn't publicly known, given that the game sold adequately and the IP gauge system makes a compelling case for preservation. It sits in a purgatory of being better than its reputation and less accessible than it deserves. The cancel mechanic, the cleanest implementation of attack cancellation as a primary tactical priority in any turn-based RPG, is reason enough to find a working copy. The battle system here is the best the Grandia series ever produced and among the best in its generation.